Welcome to Photoshop tutorial number 2. Once again, go to your handout folder, find Jay Serretta handout, grade 10 photography, section C Photoshop, and today we're going to be working on assignment 2. So if you open up assignment 2, there's a couple of documents that are going to show up in here as soon as this loads properly. And what we're going to be doing today is, if you remember last class, we talked about the selection tools and the move tool. Okay? So there is a written description of this assignment if you want to view it that will walk you through everything I'm going to cover today. Okay? And your finished product should look something like this with your name instead of Larry Walks. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to require all of these parts for this assignment. So I'm going to select them all and again drag them down to Photoshop. You can see my old assignment here still open. And here are the 4 parts that we are going to use for this assignment. Okay? Now, because my background is already this keyboard, I might as well use this as my background. So with this assignment 2 selected, I can simply go File, Save As, select your desktop, and I'm going to put my name in front of this. So Serretta _ assignment 2, click Save, and I can now begin editing this. Okay? So last class we worked with the Move tool and these 2 selection tools. Today we are going to work with this thing called a Layers panel. Okay? A few things about the Layers panel. There is this little eye that allows me to turn layers on or off. Okay? So what I'm going to do is walk you through, first of all, moving all of the parts onto this canvas. So if I go to my gauge, here's my gauge, I can go to my Move tool, grab the gauge and move it to the background and position it. Okay? Now again, using these little eyes you can turn things on or off. And let's give this a meaningful name. This is a gauge. Go to my bearing, here it is, grab and drag it to the new layer, position it, and if you feel that it's too large, once again you can go to Edit, Transform, or you can simply press Command T, which will allow you to scale or rotate it if you need to. Okay, so I'll position this in the upper corner, press Enter when I'm done my transformation, and give it a meaningful name. Whoops. Here is my bearing. Now the clock is a little bit harder. You'll notice that there's a white background around it. So I'm going to take this opportunity to teach you another tool. I could use my magnetic lasso tool to go around the clock, to select just the clock, then move it to the new layer. Or below the magnetic lasso, there is something called a magic wand tool. Okay? The magic wand tool. Now what the magic wand tool does is it allows me to select a color or a set of pixels with a certain color. If I click, you'll notice that it's missed some of the clock. Okay? The higher this tolerance is up here, so if I type in 100, the more likely it is to pick up colors that aren't quite what I'm looking for. The lower the tolerance, the more picky it is about the color that it's going to select. So you need to find something that works somewhere in between. So 15 works very nicely for this. Okay, but what I've selected is actually the area around the clock. So if I was to move that, you'll notice that I've moved the wrong thing. Okay, so what I need to do is select the opposite of what I currently have selected. A way to do that is to, up at the top, there is a menu called Select. And I can deselect what I currently have selected, or I can select the inverse. You'll notice that now I have the clock selected. Go to my Move tool, and I can move the clock to my new assignment. Okay, and press Command T to transform it. There's my clock. Give it a meaningful name. And I can now edit these objects. I'm going to leave the gauge and the bearing alone. But with one of these, the clock, I'm going to show you about something called a screen blending mode. Now by default, whenever you drag a new object onto a canvas, it sets the blending mode to normal. Okay? But if I hit this drop down, you will see that there is a bunch of different options I can apply to this that are pre-built in. Okay? And for this assignment, I would like you to change it to screen. So it kind of washes out the clock. Okay? So clock is set to screen, bearing is normal, gauge is normal, background is normal. Okay? Now, one more tool we're going to learn about today. Actually, we're going to learn two more. But the two tools we're going to learn today are this text tool that looks like a capital letter T. And just below your eraser, there is a paint bucket. And if I click and hold, it brings up this gradient tool. Okay? So with this gradient tool selected, what I'm going to do is create a new layer. And again, using this layers panel, a way to create a new layer is go down to the bottom of the layers panel and click on create new layer. And this is going to be where I put my gradient. Okay? Now, the way a gradient works is it takes your two colors, and I can see that I have this set to a kind of off white and white. It takes those two colors and it blends them. Notice there's a preview up here of what a gradient will look like. Okay? Or I can reset the background colors by clicking on this little black and white icon. Okay? So that's the gradient. There are a couple of options you have with your gradient. There's a linear gradient, which we're going to use today. There is a radial gradient, an angle gradient, a reflected gradient, and a diamond gradient. Now, going from black to white is okay, but if I actually click on this box, it brings up a gradient editor. So there's a bunch of pre-built gradients that I can select from, or I can make my own. Here, I can see that it's going from black to white. If I move close to the gradient till I get the little hand and I click, I can add more colors. And if I double click on them, I can change those colors. Okay? So I can change and be very specific about the type of colors that I want in my gradient. If I would like to remove a color, I simply need to grab the color and pull it away from the gradient bar. And I can slide these to adjust them. I don't want that. There we go. And when I'm happy with my gradient, I can simply click OK. Now making sure that I'm on the new layer, because if I'm on the wrong layer and I click to draw my gradient, it's going to delete the object. Okay? So you need to be on it a separate layer. Now if I click and draw a line, it creates that gradient. The shorter the line, the more abrupt the gradient will be. The longer the line, the more gradual the gradient will be. Okay? And you can go in any direction. Once I have drawn my gradient, a new feature or another feature of the layers panel is something called opacity. This is how opaque the object layer is. 100% means you cannot see through it. 0 means you can see through it completely. It's completely transparent. So I'm going to set this to about 60 maybe. Okay? And you can see that I'll go a little less. It has created a nice effect over top of my background. Okay? That's how you use the gradient tool. I'll just reset my gradient back to its original. Okay? And the final tool we're going to learn today is the text tool. Now the way the text tool works is when you select it, up at the top you can change the font style that you use. You can change the size of it, and I would select something small for right now. Draw a box and then type in your name. Now if I select that, I can adjust the size and make sure that it's not too big. Okay, there's pretty good. I can also change the color of the font if I want to. And again, I can change the style. So here is my text layer. And what I'm going to do is, again, using this layers panel, I'm going to create layer effects. Now the way to do that is you can double click on the layer to bring up the layer effects. Or down at the bottom, you can click on the FX and bring up blending options. Now, I can preview what's happening as I check things off. If I want a drop shadow, I can add one. If I want an outer glow, I can add one. If I want to bevel and emboss, I can add one. If I want to change the features of these, notice that this panel here is not changing if I simply check it off. But if I actually click on the effect, so the text drop shadow, it changes this. So I can change the distance of the drop shadow. I can add an outer glow. Click on the word outer glow. I can change the color of the outer glow. I can change the spread of the outer glow, the size. Add bevel and emboss. Click on bevel and emboss, and I can change that as well. I can add color overlays, gradient overlays. Click on gradient overlay. Or I can even add pattern overlays. So experiment with some of those different types of effects, and you'll notice that they show up here now, and I can turn them on or off as I wish. When you're done, save your assignment, click OK, and this is what your finished product should look like. Okay? So please save that and hand it in to the hand-in folder.